Anybody not ready? All right, good morning. I'm Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri. With me is St. Petersburg Police Chief Anthony Holloway. This is a Pinellas County Use of Deadly Force Task Force investigation because there was a shooting by a St. Petersburg police officer. I'm going to run through for you what happened here this morning. Again, as always, this is preliminary information as we know it now. It's all subject to change. It's fluid. It's an active investigation, ongoing, and I'm going to give you the best information that I have. This is a little bit of a complicated scene because of what happened, how it all played out. I'll run through it for you, answer whatever questions I can, but it's a little bit of a limited information situation because we still have a lot of interviews to do. There's a lot of people involved in this. So the incident happened and began at about 11:50 p.m. Last night. St. Petersburg Police were called to 215 29th Street South, which is a residence about 2 blocks to the south behind me here. There was a woman and her boyfriend and her child that had come to this residence to stay with a man by the name of Jared, J-E-R-E-D. His middle name is Romeo and his last name is Fenderson, F-E-N-D-E-R-S-O-N. His date of birth is 11/1/96. Fenderson lives here, knew this woman. She and her boyfriend and child were transient, didn't have a place to stay. He said they'd come stay for a while with him at this location. This is a location, it's a big house divided into several different rooms. So it's kind of a rooming house with at least 6 different rooms. Everybody has a room number. He has one room within this house. So there's multiple stories and multiple corridors or hallways within the house. So they came yesterday and began staying with him there. When they got there yesterday, he showed them that he had a firearm. They weren't concerned about it. He didn't threaten anybody with it and referenced that the firearm was for protection, that they were safe because he had a gun. Again, didn't really think anything of it. They go through the day yesterday. They're there. Last night in his room, he had left and they were in his bed. So you had the man, the woman, and the child in the bed. He came back in, got upset because they were in his bed. Made threats to them and then took the gun and pointed it at them. He committed 3 counts of an aggravated assault with a firearm on the child and the 2 adults. They called St. Pete Police, came up here to the intersection of 1st Avenue South and 29th Street behind me here, and met with an officer. Explained what happened. There was probable cause to arrest Fenderson on the aggravated assault charges. Other St. Petersburg officers went to the home. When they got to the home, Fenderson came out and the officers had set up a perimeter around the house, trying to get a plan as to how they were going to handle this. He came out with a gun and began firing. He fired rounds at the officers and one of the officers returned fire. That officer is Hayden, H-A-Y-D-E-N. Last name is Tuggle, T-U-G-G-L-E. Officer Tuggle is a patrol officer assigned to this district, and he was one of the first ones here. After Officer Tuggle returned fire, he did not strike Fenderson, and Fenderson went back into the house. Other officers arrived along with supervisors. They set up a perimeter and began to communicate with Fenderson, trying to get him to come out. He fired some additional rounds inside the house, and at about 1:30 this morning, the shift commander decided, based upon those additional rounds being fired, that it required a SWAT call out. The St. Petersburg Police Department SWAT team arrived. As they were arriving and began to set up, he came back out again and fired more rounds. At that point, the SWAT officers were in place. They exchanged some gunfire with him. One of the snipers from the SWAT team had been set up to the south, and he was able to shoot one time, strike Fenderson in the chest. The other 2 shooters that I'll identify, one I'm not going to identify because he's an undercover detective who serves on the SWAT team, but the other 2 were Robert Snipe, S-N-I-P-P-E, and the sniper whose round hit Fenderson is Officer Quentin, Q-U-E-N-T-I-N -Lee, and last name is Morgan, M-O-R-G-A-N. So Officer Morgan fired from a sniper rifle, struck Fenderson as he was firing at the officers. Fenderson retreated back into the house, if you will, the apartment building in a hallway, and was on the ground in there. A SWAT team, entry team went in, found him on the ground, brought him out. He was treated by St. Pete Fire Rescue and transported to Bayfront. So he is in stable but critical condition. It is not life-threatening. He shot with a rifle round in the upper chest area, but he, by all accounts, is expected to survive. So we're processing the scene, we're conducting the interviews, conducting the investigation. That's what we know now. I'll answer any questions that you have, but that's pretty much what we know.
Can you take us through the evacuation? We know about half a dozen people were evacuated.
From the house? Oh, yeah. Everybody in the house was evacuated. Certainly there are other people living in there. And he, because of the rounds he was firing, and some of those people actually called the St. Petersburg Police Department as well. So there were a number of people evacuated. Of course, we would always do in this type of a situation where you got somebody that's firing rounds, and probably people from the area itself. There was probably a neighborhood evacuation to some degree.
Did they just exit through a door, or?
Yeah, they came out the door. Yeah.
They all kind of came running out as the shots were being fired, or were some inside when the exchange of gunfire was happening?
Some were inside, and it was staggered as people were coming out.
So they kind of evacuated throughout the
Right. I mean, they hear the gunshots and they start coming out and realizing that they got to get out of there because there's bad things happening.
And then from the street, could you just kind of talk about the danger outside the home at that time?
Well, yeah, I mean, luckily it's late at night, early in the morning. I mean, the officers were in positions to cover across the street. The sniper was down the street. There was nobody on the street. He came out, and, people were in danger because he was firing out the front door and firing across the street at where the officers were. Luckily nobody else was injured. We're still, again, conducting the investigation, trying to figure out where all the rounds went. Very easily could have gone into a house across the street the way he was firing. He just came out and was just randomly firing. We do have a photograph of the gun. I gave it to our PIO people. They'll send it out to you. It looks like it's a Springfield 9mm. Probably had somewhere 10, 15 round magazine, somewhere in that range. But again, we're going to get a search warrant for his house in there, or his apartment in the building, to see if there's any more guns, any more ammunition, any more magazines. I don't know if he reloaded or what he did, but he fired a lot of rounds. He was randomly firing inside, then came out, and at least 2, possibly 3 different times there was a volley of gunfire exchange between him and the officers. And finally, unfortunately, Officer Morgan was able to strike him the last time, which is when he went down, and we were able to, St. Petersburg Police were able to stop him from hurting anybody.
You talked about the aggravated assault charges on the woman, man, and child. Did he strike them? How did he assault?
So an aggravated assault is not a striking. In this case, it's with a firearm. It's basically a threat with a firearm that puts somebody in fear that they're going to be shot. And the way he was acting and the things he said, and he made a comment to somebody that he was going to kill the kid. He made a lot of statements to the effect that he wanted to kill people. So he was saying things while he was pointing the gun at them, and even subsequently, and during the time that they had him on the phone, where the officers had him on the phone, he was making threatening statements.
Any idea what set him off, if you will, overnight? Everything seemed normal when these visitors went to bed, and then...
So, what we see time and again is that, in part of your question, and you're correct, is something sets these people off. Usually they have some sort of a grievance, they have some sort of something instigates it, something initiates it, and in this case, for whatever reason, the thing that set him off was, it doesn't make any sense. Maybe it will to some degree as we get into the investigation, but he invited them over. They didn't have a place to stay. It's a one-room apartment within this multi-room residence. He's got one bed in there, and he comes back and is ticked off because they're in his bed sleeping. Well, where does he think they're going to sleep, right? So it doesn't, but apparently that's what set him off, and why he pulled the gun on them, started threatening them, and told them that if they didn't get out, that he was going to shoot them. And then, of course, they got scared and left, and did the right thing and called the police. So what appeared to set him off was the fact that he invited them over They didn't have a place to stay, and they were in his bed.
And he knew them prior to this, or
Yes.
they were? Okay.
Yes, yeah. He knew the woman.
And the suspect was in his underwear during a lot of this standoff. Did he return home in that state of undress, or did he just get angry and take his clothes off? Like, do we know about that?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. Don't know that. So, I don't anticipate probably releasing any additional information until we get further into the investigation. If anything changes, we'll let you know. Anything substantial that you need to know, we'll put it out. But I don't anticipate this is good. There's a lot of witnesses, 12 SWAT team members. There's probably 20, 25 witnesses that need to be interviewed, which is going to take most of the day today. So I really don't anticipate putting much out during the rest of the day today, perhaps tomorrow. And if anything changes, we'll let you know.
Thank you, Sheriff.
All right,
Thanks,
thanks. Yeah.